All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Nature Journal Show. I'm really excited to be here with Sefi George. You're an illustrator and a nature journaler and an educator based in Mumbai, India. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
So, you're going to be teaching at the Wild Wonder Conference this year, and your class is called Color Theory with Nature's Palette. Could you maybe share some recent sketches or some of your artwork and tell us about how color plays a role in your work?
Right. So the class that I'm taking is actually inspired by this spread I did in my nature journal. What I've done here is I've just tried to document the birds that I see in terms of their colors. So
Mm,
very often we see a bird just whizzing past us and we don't really have the time to look at the details. But what we
hmm.
can capture immediately is the kind of color that they have. So it's a class that's focusing a bit on color theory, but more onto trying to identify what colors we see around us and how we can reproduce those colors in our sketchbook.
Great.
As nature
I
journalists,
love color.
as nature journalists, we usually have like really tiny kits with us, right? This is my
Hmm.
current watercolor palette, and I've used something as tiny as this.
Whoa.
So one of the aims of the class is to get you to be able to choose your colors wisely so that even with just these little colors, you'll be able to paint whatever you want.
Okay, awesome. That's great. I love how you summarized your class so succinctly. Could you tell us maybe about your teaching style and teaching background?
So I have a little brand called Summer Scribbles where I've been taking art and illustration workshops since 2013. I used to do a lot of classes with kids. Over the
Hmm.
last few years, I've done a lot of classes with adults too. And I actually teach research at a design school. I teach them ethnography. So I am quite a lot into the teaching line. And if I may say one thing, I really enjoy teaching kids more than adults because adults have so much of self doubt. They're just so scared to put their pen onto paper because, oh my God, will this work right? What if it doesn't work right? What if I make a mistake? Kids don't care. They'll put all their ideas on paper and then ask me, teacher, how is this?
Yeah, yeah, I
So
love that.
it's a whole different experience teaching kids versus teaching adults. I'm pretty sure that once adults realize this, they take a little more effort to, free themselves of these expectations.
Yeah. I think children are the best at learning, so we can learn from them if we're interested in learning.
Right. And they also pay attention to a lot of things that we tend to overlook. So if you go on a
Mm,
nature trail with a child, you're likely to spot way more than if you go with an adult.
absolutely. Okay, so what materials do people need for your class?
So for my class, we'll require some watercolor paper, a few basic watercolors. So before the class, I'll be sharing a list of some of the colors I'll be using, but basically six watercolors with which we can mix all the other colors of the rainbow. That's the main idea here. Uh, a brush, yeah, that's it. A sketchbook, your
Okay,
journal.
cool. So, and then you're gonna post. So this is something that has come up in some of the other interviews. If you're watching this, and are attending the conference, just so you know, it's really important for a lot of these classes to look at the instructor's class description on the Shed or Sked platform that is gonna go live. It's gonna go live at the beginning of September, I believe, and you'd be able to look up Sefi's class, and then you would also be able to receive emails if you've clicked on that you're planning on attending that class. So do your best to be prepared for these classes because instructors put a lot of work into them. So why is color theory important for nature journalers, in your opinion?
I think so. If you look at the Merlin app, for example, where you
Mm,
identify birds, one of the first questions that they ask you is what color was the bird?
mm-hmm,
And that kind of helps a lot in trying to identify what you're seeing, right? So, in that sense, trying to identify things in nature using color as a backdrop is an essential
mm,
skill for nature journalists. And trying to record that color down, trying to put it into your journal it really helps in conveying information well. So I feel
mm,
learning to see color. So if you see a flower that is red, what kind of red is it? Is it
Mm,
leaning more towards orange? Is it leaning more towards pink? Is there some way you can accurately depict that color? I think
mhm,
once people have this, they have this feel towards trying to identify colors, it becomes a whole lot easier to try and journal and be more accurate with your observations.
mm.
To give you one little example, I went on a
Yeah,
all women's nature walk recently, and these are some of the flowers that I saw on the way.
I'm gonna put you on the solo. Ooh, yeah,
So this was, I think,
cool.
my latest nature journaling page. And some
Mhm,
of these flowers had such gorgeous colors that it would have been a real challenge to depict them if I did not know how to
mm.
get to those colors. Like
Yeah,
the gorgeous maroon that you see here it was such
mhm,
a stunning plant. It's called a crepe ginger, and
mm,
that red was really striking in the forest. So trying to accurately depict that was quite a challenge, and I think it's fun to see that you have the skill to actually put this down onto paper and help people identify the plant as it actually is.
mhm. So you've mentioned a lot of these really great practical reasons of why color is important. It's like information about nature. What do you think about sort of the emotional impact of color?
See, as an illustrator, I feel that every choice we make in our sketchbooks and our sketches is very intentional. So if we all know that color conveys mood a lot, it can actually help in the way you choose to compose an image, in the way you choose to highlight certain things and not others. I think color plays a major role in just getting the viewer to feel something.
Mhm,
And if we know how to use our colors wisely, we can accurately guide the viewer's eye to noticing those things.
mhm. Cool. So for everyone who's watching this live or as a recorded version, I highly recommend checking out Sefi's Instagram at Summer Scribbles, and you'll get a really good idea of what she's talking about with color. The color really shines through on your Instagram feed. So it was really easy to kind of find stuff like, oh, okay, she's teaching a class about color. Okay, it's easy to find something for like the thumbnail for the video and all of that. So okay, great. So in terms of the conference, are you planning on taking some classes as well or going to any of the speeches?
I'm honestly planning to attend all of them as much as my time zone allows it. It's starting at 8:30 p.m. for me, so as
Wow.
much as I can, yes. I'm really looking
Okay.
forward to Sushma Hegde's class on painting flowers. I'm looking
Yes.
forward to the fast sketching of birds. I'm
Mhm.
looking forward to a lot of classes, to be honest. I think with
Yeah.
nature journaling, we do learn a lot from other people who do it. So,
Mm.
trying to get their techniques and applying them in my sphere would be really interesting. In
Great.
fact,
And
I've learned a
so
lot from your
mhm.
YouTube videos.
Oh, cool. Thank you. So how do you balance teaching and learning?
I think they both go together. They both complement each other. The more when you try to teach something, you actually have to learn it enough to be able to explain it in a coherent way. So even when I'm teaching a complicated thing like anthropology or ethnography, I make sure that if a 10-year-old hears me, they'll be able to understand what I'm saying. So I try to simplify it as much as possible. I'm not a big fan of using jargon. I
Mhm.
prefer practical things that people can actually act on, something that they can actually take away. Um, so teaching is a big part of my career right now. I'm mostly illustrating. I've been doing a lot of projects with different clients, but teaching is what keeps me sane. That's what I would say.
Mm.
Illustrating can be a very lonely
Mm.
profession because you're sitting in your room doing it yourself. So teaching is one way that I get to interact with people and feed my creative soul.
Yeah, I can relate to that because I don't think I would be good if all of the work that I did was by myself, like doing illustrations. It's partly why I realized scientific illustration probably isn't the best for me, because just being there so focused on the work and so by myself for long periods of time, like I need the interaction with other people, I think, to be sane, like you're saying. Okay, so I have a bunch of other topics that I'm really excited to talk about, such as nature journaling in India, which is something I'm very interested in and have been for several years. I have been to India, but I didn't nature journal, unfortunately, when I was there. But I'm very so we're gonna definitely have to talk about that, and also more about your work, illustration, and also your teaching in the ethnography and anthropology are things that I'm interested in as well. But first, let's do the lightning round. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Okay.
Okay. So let me set up the. Oh, and let's say hi to the people who are here. Ivea is chatting here in the comments. I see Terry is here and Sakshi Mangla is here as well. They all are saying hi. And
Hello. So
yeah,
nice to
so
see you all.
okay. So let's set up our lightning round thing here. And can you make a lightning sound or thunder sound, I guess?
Not sure how it sounds. But like, shh. That's not a very
Great.
hacking sound.
No, that was good. That was good. All right. So the first ones are just sort of short answer and some of them are like yes or no questions. So um is coffee an essential art supply?
No, I'm not very addicted to coffee or tea or anything.
Okay. Organized or messy?
Super, super messy. Causes a lot of
Okay.
fights at home, but I'm very messy.
Okay. Do you prefer to nature journal alone or with other people?
With other people, I think when you're in a group, you tend to notice a lot more things because you have too many sets of eyes looking at things.
Mm-hmm. Um, does your family understand your art?
They do. Sometimes they wonder why I'm not in a more stable profession, but they love seeing what I do.
Okay. Um, do you eat snacks while you're making art?
Yes, I do a lot.
Are you a perfectionist?
I wouldn't say I'm a perfectionist, but I'm someone who's very punctual. I like being able to submit projects at the time that I commit to them. So, as perfect as it gets.
That's very important for client work. Plants or animals?
Animals. I find it, as an illustrator, I find it much easier to make animals into characters than plants.
Oh. Ink or graphite?
I would say ink. It's more immediate and less chance. I mean, there's less chance of being able to edit it later.
Mm. When it comes to art supplies, do you maximize or minimize?
I maximize when I'm at home, but I minimize when I go out to sketch.
That's a very practical approach. Do you like nature journaling the big picture or the micro things in nature?
So when I'm out nature journaling, I focus on the micro. But this micro is basically a visual library collection for when I have to go macro. Can I give you a
Mm.
little example of this?
Yes.
So I've been working, I mean, last year I worked on this calendar, which has the wildlife of India's national parks. So, for example, you have around 8 to 10 animals in each frame here.
Huh?
And most of these are creatures that, I may have seen individually, but then putting them together in the scene and showing how their entire ecosystem works, that is one example of going from micro to
Oh,
macro.
I like that. That's cool. That's a cool way to explain that. Um, okay, and then would you rather nature journal on the planet Mars or in the deep sea?
The deep sea. I'm pretty sure there's a lot more life in the deep sea than on Mars.
Yes, everybody, see, I need to change this question because all of the nature journalers say deep sea. It's too easy. Okay, do you work fast or slow?
Really fast. If
Okay.
I- if
And
I if a project stretches on for more than a week, I get bored with it. So I prefer fast.
okay, and then if you're making art or nature journaling in public and What facial expression do you make when someone comes up to you and says, "You are so talented, I could never do that"?
Very often this has happened, and I've actually given them a pencil and a paper, and I told them just try. So
Nice,
I keep
nice.
telling them, if you do 100 sketches, your first sketch will definitely be worse than your 100th sketch. You'll definitely see progress. But if you just do a sketch on day one and day 100, that's not going to work out. It's
Yes,
consistency and showing up that matters.
nice. Okay, so those are the short answers for the lightning round, but we still have a few more. If you could nature journal with any historical figure, who would you want to go nature journaling with?
That's a really good question. Actually, Douglas Adams, the
Mm,
author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He's
yeah.
got a very interesting book called Last Chance to See.
Oh, I
I don't
love
know
that
if
book.
I really love that book. It's so interesting to see how he goes around and he has this very unique perspective on everything that he's seen. I'm pretty sure I would have got some really interesting insights if I was traveling with him and exploring the world that way.
Nobody knows about that book.
I know
Um,
everyone knows about the Hitchhiker's Guide, but nobody knows
yeah,
about this book.
I read that
Everyone
one and
watching, please go read this book. It's really, really
yeah,
fun.
I tried reading The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy after that one, but I didn't. I it was not. I don't know. The Komodo dragon stuff and just the whole concept I think is very interesting. It was a very influential little book for me. Oh, there's other people here mentioning the book. So Terry knows about that book also. Okay,
Everyone should know
so
about it.
okay, Douglas Adams. No one has ever said Douglas Adams for that question, so that's very interesting. And then, okay, if you could have a nature journaling superpower, what superpower would you want?
Hmm. The ability to not get tired. The
Mm,
reason I'm saying this is so I live in Mumbai. It's extremely humid. 10 minutes out
mm,
in the open and you're sweating buckets and you're completely drained
yeah.
of energy. So if there was any way that I could spend the entire day outdoors journaling, I would definitely love that.
Mm.
So yeah.
That's a really good one, and I don't think anyone has come up with that one before, even though someone has said like they would want like a climate controlled bubble that goes around them wherever they go, so then the humidity wouldn't be a problem in that case. But I like the energy one. Okay, so if you're gonna be stuck on a deserted island, um, and all your survival needs are taken care of, but you could only have 5 art supplies or nature journaling supplies. What supplies would you take with you?
Mm. Is my phone part of an art supply or is that a survival need?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say it's not a survival need.
Okay, then definitely my phone. My
Okay.
sketchbook. I like using sketchbooks that have really white paper because I like to scan my work and it really
Mm,
helps to have a white base. Watercolors. I like to squeeze them from tubes into a little tiny palette.
mhm,
So this is actually a kid's watercolor set, which is really cheap, like 25 rupees in India.
mhm.
And I popped out the original colors and squeezed some of my professional tubes
Oh,
in this.
nice.
Um, a brush. I like using
Mhm,
the silver black velvet. And
mhm.
lastly, a pencil. So there are three pencils that I usually use. This is the Stedler Mars Black. This is a
Mhm.
Luminance Orange. And this is actually a multicolor pencil. It's got like 7 colors on
Oh.
the nib.
Oh, wow.
All of these give like really unique lines. And the best part about it is you can't really erase them. So you have to commit to the line.
Okay. All right. Nice. You're ready for the desert island. So for people who are watching this at home, put in the comments what 5 supplies would you take with you? Okay, so and then our last question for the lightning round is if there was a nature journaling Olympics, what event at the Olympics would you be participating in?
Hmm, that's a good question. I think it's apt for the class to say mixing the right color.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one. It's an important thing. I'm finishing making a Skillshare class, but it'll also be on other platforms too, all about mixing and matching colors from real life because I think it's something that people really struggle with. So I love color theory, and I'm looking forward to your class and seeing like what I can learn from there. And I've definitely been doing like a lot of over the last like 2 months, a lot of work on color. So I definitely am thinking about it a lot. Okay, good job in the lightning round. That was really fun. And let's see if I can make that go away. Okay, all right. So now let's talk about nature journaling in India. Um, what have been your experiences so far, or are you part of I can't remember if you told me you started a club, or could you just share a little bit about your experiences nature journaling in India?
So, nature journaling specifically is something I started off around, like, say, 2 years ago. I think the first
Hmm.
time I really properly focused on it was during International Nature Journaling Week in 2023. But I've been doing observational drawing for a really long time. I just didn't call it nature journaling that time because I
Right.
didn't know what it was. Um, I did my master's in sociology, anthropology, and after that, I did a course in children's book illustration. So while we were learning illustration, a lot of focus was given on actually observing and drawing. So in terms of
Hmm.
drawing people, cultures, nature, everything of that sort.
Wow.
So I learned that the more you look and observe, the more accurate or the more location specific your illustrations get. Being generic is something that anyone can do, but the point of being an
Mm,
illustrator in a country like India is that you really have to depict cultures well. And observation is key for that. You can't make assumptions. You have to actually observe and use that as your base for your illustrations. So that's where I kind of started. I realized that your See, no one else can tell your story. It has to be you. So the kind of things you observe, you are the only one who will be able to communicate that. So that's the same thing with nature, right? The things that I see them in a unique way. And being able to document that is something really important. Not everyone does that, and I wish everyone did. It
mm,
also helps build that connection to nature, which is very vital in a city like Mumbai. We have really amazing tiny ecosystems here that people don't really know about, and I think nature journaling is one way to kind of bring them into focus. Um, that being said, I don't know a lot of nature journalists in India. I am familiar with a few of them, and they are really nice people to interact with. But there isn't much of a community that I have found, especially in Mumbai. I have taken a few workshops, but sustaining this as a club is a little difficult.
mhm.
I'm already a part of too many clubs, to be honest. I'm a part of the Urban Sketchers Mumbai. We have a smaller group called Suburban Sketchers. I'm a part of a lot of illustration clubs and things like that. So trying to find time for one more thing is a little too much. Plus,
Mhm,
I go for a lot of nature trails around Mumbai. So in times like these, I do carry around. So I have my main sketchbook that I use for when I'm out in the garden alone, or I don't have this time restriction. But when I'm with a group, I prefer carrying like a little jot book like this.
mm,
This is something made
mhm,
by Rohan Chakravarti, Green Humor. So
mm,
he has these little A6 size jot books. And this is
mhm,
what my observation, I mean, the notes that I take would kind of look like. Really little
mhm,
tally marks and a few little observations that I've seen. This is so that I don't slow down the group. But
mhm.
other than that, I usually sit. I have a little garden near my home, which overlooks a mangrove forest. I love sitting there. I have this really beautiful sit spot where I've just sat in that one spot and I've spotted more than 45 species of birds.
Whoa.
And it's so cool that this feels like a little secret to me because I don't see anyone else doing that. Everyone else
Mhm.
comes to that garden just to walk and do their exercises, but they don't even notice the wonder that's around them. So I mean, there are people who have seen my nature journals, and because of that, they began to notice the nature around them. So that's what I'm hoping to do with nature journaling: get people to
Cool.
actually look at and notice nature around them.
Cool. So I'm gonna sort of reflect a couple things that I'm hearing to help my own thought process and listening, and then also for people who are watching to kind of help get some of these concepts. So one thing that you pointed out that I think is really important is sometimes the name of what we call something is the only difference between, so for example, calling something nature journaling is sometimes helpful to find other people or maybe to organize our thoughts, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that people aren't doing things that are basically nature journaling without knowing that name. So it sounds like in some ways you were starting to do that, and it's also probably very likely that there's many people in India that are doing observational drawing, as you mentioned, or combining maybe in their urban sketching, maybe they're putting in more notes and writing down different like birds that they see or things like that could all be basically nature journaling, but it's just that that expression or that term might not be used and maybe it's not even useful. So I think that's one important thing for myself to remember, but also for other people to remember when we're talking about like nature journaling in different places or how long someone's been nature journaling or how long nature journaling has been happening. It's just like a term, like a category. And then another thing that I think was really cool that you shared is having sort of a practice where you have different types of sketchbooks or different approaches that you use in different situations. So for folks who have been looking at your stuff on Instagram and online and like your illustration type stuff, it's very colorful, and maybe feeling intimidated by that. It's really useful to see your other small jot book where you have like these quicker, very with lots of notes and stuff. So I think that's really interesting as well. You also mentioned how um, some of the potential benefits of like people seeing you nature journaling and then wanting to pay attention more. So I spoke with someone reached out to me from Mumbai for advice about teaching nature journaling groups, and I can't remember his name right now. But we organized a Zoom and I talked to him on Zoom, and from our messages originally, it sounded like he was just getting started, and because he had so many questions about how to teach groups and everything. And then when I learned what he was doing, it sounded like he had already done multiple sessions in a intertidal area. I think it's somewhere where there's like maybe oysters and other shellfish. And I think it was collaborating with a club that is mostly focused on just looking at the nature. They're naturalists and they go and they look at stuff. But have you met anyone doing nature journaling in a coastal area near Mumbai? That sounds
We actually
familiar.
have a group called Marine Life of Mumbai. I'm guessing you're talking about Gaurav Patil, who is he does a lot of nature journaling workshops and he's
Oh,
focused a
okay.
lot on the coastal area. He's actually a good friend. He lives a few buildings away from me, and he's one of the people I keep going to when I spot something that's slightly aquatic. I text a picture to him and ask him to help me identify it. So it's
Cool.
really great having these groups here. There actually are many groups that are focusing on nature. So Marine Life of Mumbai is one. They have an amazing Instagram page where you can spot a lot of cool creatures.
Ooh.
In fact, they have this Pokemon challenge going on where you have to find real life creatures that are inspired by um, Pokemon or vice versa. Sorry.
Yeah, I like that. That's really cool.
We also
Okay.
have the Bombay Natural History Society that
Oh.
has a lot of scientists, researchers working in this field, and they have this conservation education center. It's pretty close to my home, where they do take you out for trails, and there are a lot of trained naturalists that tell you about the place and the things that you're seeing. There are a lot of tiny groups here, but it's not very mainstream. That's what I would say.
Hmm.
For if you have a day off in Mumbai, you're more likely to go to a mall than to go to the forest. So
Hmm.
it's not
Hmm.
really a trend to be one with nature in that sense.
Right, right. So, that was one of my other questions and you already mentioned urban sketching is big in India. Is that true?
We do have a lot of interesting urban sketching groups. So the group in Mumbai is almost like 100 people strong. We have a
Mm-hmm.
smaller group of those who live in North Mumbai. That's around say 30 people strong, and
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty regular. We meet up every Sunday or Thursday, depending on the group. And there are multiple chapters all over India. We
Mm-hmm.
do meet where they do go to explore a lot of places, and they have various kinds of styles. it's really interesting to learn from a group like that.
Yeah, I follow several watercolorists in India and some different nature photographers on Instagram. It's always hard on Instagram though. I think I follow like 1,000 people or something. So then sometimes it's I don't see for a long time, and then it's hard to remember anything, like the name of the person or whatever that you see. But it does seem like watercolor is also pretty popular in India, right?
I think yes, watercolor is pretty popular, especially among those who paint out in the field.
Mm.
Because
Hmm.
carrying a larger kit of acrylics or oils or anything like that is a little bit of a challenge. Watercolor is more portable for those on the field, and I think everyone just comes down to it just comes down to the ease of using watercolor. It
Yeah.
is pretty popular here.
So I'm trying to be like objective about this and sort of reflective as well. But I'm really excited that I think India, I think the subcontinent in general has like a lot of interesting potential in the nature journaling world. And I think, for example, like really there's been a lot of nature journaling growth in the US and Canada, and then Australia and England. And I think it's partly just because a, it's in a lot of the content is still is in English still, right? And so I've been working a lot in Spanish speaking countries in South America and nature journaling in Spanish and stuff like that. But the one really cool thing about India is there's so many English speakers there. There's more English speakers in India, I think, than in the US. And so it's like I think there's not like a language barrier as much because there's so many um, English speakers. So I don't know why I'm interested in it. I think I'm partly just interested in seeing nature journaling being used in other places besides just the US, Canada, Australia, and England, especially mega biodiverse places, because I believe India is in the top 10 most biodiverse countries in the world, and with a very large urban population as well. So I know that you mentioned this in our conversation before, but could you? Um, Reflect a little bit more about your thoughts on urban versus rural and nature journaling and what that means in India.
If I go back to the point you mentioned about language, it's not that most Indians are, comfortable with English. The thing is, most of us know more than two languages. I
Right.
myself, I know English, I know Hindi, I know a bit of Marathi, I speak a lot of Malayalam, which is my mother tongue. And the point is, the more languages you learn, the more frames you have to kind of look at the world. The way you think about the world when you talk in English is quite different to the way it is in Hindi, for example. So it's a real asset to have multiple worldviews in that sense. I have always studied in an English medium. In the English medium school. I used to speak to my friends in English. So when I went for this illustration course, which was in a really small town called Hoshangabad, most people don't even know about this town, and it's a small town. Most people there speak Hindi, and initially I had a real culture shock because I wasn't
Mm,
that comfortable with the language. But when I got used to it in a week or so, I realized that they have so many interesting stories to tell. And a lot of these stories can't really be translated in English, or, it doesn't have the same effect. So it always helps learning multiple languages to try and see the world from different points of view. Um, and even though, so as you mentioned, the urban rural divide, in urban areas, we're actually taught a bit about nature. We have our science and environmental, all these classes, and we learn through textbooks. But people in rural areas, they actually know a lot more than us because they experience it firsthand. Nature is not something you can learn through books alone. You need to
mhm,
experience it. There's a lot of traditional knowledge that is very useful, which we often overlook when it comes to books. And I think that's one of the in fact, I would say I have learned more from people I've met in rural spaces than I have from any of the seminars and conferences that I've attended. Local
mhm.
knowledge is really an asset that we need to focus on, especially when it comes to nature journaling.
Okay, so since you're an anthropologist, I want to ask you a question that's concerned me for a while also. And well, first of all, I love everything you're saying about language. And for many years, I've been since like the first Wild Wonder conference, I've been trying to instigate conversations about nature journaling in multiple languages besides English. And usually during some of the breakout sessions during the online conference, we still have those of us who are in a comfortable time zone for it. There's these sessions where you can have conversations, right? Instead of just listening to the teachers speak. So I never miss those because that's the one chance to hear other people's voices who are just attendees. I always try to have one about language because, like you're saying, nature journaling and the language is a filter and it's a frame that biases what you can talk about or what you can observe. And so, if someone is nature journaling in a language that they associate with the government and academia and what they had to learn in school, that's going to be a different experience than if they're nature journaling in the language that they learned from their mother, where they grew up. And so I think um, trying to encourage in whatever ways like the growth of nature journaling in a grassroots way in different languages to see even how it would evolve and if it's possible in other languages as opposed to just making like because right now it's growing so much in English. We're developing vocabulary, all these terms and expressions for different types of nature journaling, and then there's attempts to translate that into other languages, but that's also not the same as if it grows autochtonously in different languages. So, one question I have for you is how much of the nature journaling sort of perspective do you think can be um, can be applicable to people living. You mentioned traditional ecological knowledge and stuff like that. Do you think that nature journaling is some, because in my mind, the tools are very accessible. A pencil and paper is something that people can access in a lot of parts of the world. Do you think that nature journaling can be something that can be like adopted and become grow and sort of evolve within like a traditional knowledge framework, or will it always be sort of like something kind of, or are there certain aspects of it that are will always seem or be completely, can it be like adopted by um, you know traditional cultures in a way without um, always just being like an external or different way of seeing the world? Like, is it too rational? Or sometimes when I'm teaching it, like for example, I've taught um, in indigenous communities in the Amazon rainforest, nature journaling, and I'm teaching, about curiosity and question asking and asking everything, like and then later I'm because I'm thinking, oh, those are so important things, and then later I'm thinking like, is critical thinking not actually a part of many traditional knowledge systems? And if it maybe it's even a way of undermining traditional knowledge systems. I know that's sort of a long question, but what are your thoughts on that?
I think nature journaling is an interesting way to get multiple perspectives on the same thing. So if you like for example, if I'm trying to study a particular bird, I can look at a whole lot of books on it. I can read up a lot. I can check out on eBird or Merlin or this and that. But the kind of stories that you get when you speak to local folks, especially those who are slightly older, who may not have gone to a traditional school. I think schooling destroys a lot of imagination and local knowledge. But those, especially those who have lived in the forest, for example, uh, that kind of knowledge is really valuable. So one small example, there's this bird called, I think it's the Indian cuckoo. It's called brain fever bird. The call sounds like it's going on saying brain fever.
Hmm.
Almost every language there's a different word that it's called, and it's very onomatopoeic, right? The
Hmm.
sound
Hmm.
kind of, they try to translate that sound in their own language, and it's really interesting to see the kind of variations that they hear within the same sound. Every language has a different name for this bird, and a lot of folk tales actually mention that when you hear the sound, the monsoon is coming, the rains are
Hmm.
going to start soon. And this is the kind of knowledge that people think is too it's too much of a folk tale to actually include in scientific literature. But a lot of these folk tales have come up with people observing nature, taking down notes, passing this information down through generations. And I feel documenting these are really important if we want to have a holistic kind of way of understanding the world. Another example I would give you is I keep going for walks around the mangroves, okay? And in the monsoon, there were a lot of these little plants and weeds that have grown on that road. One day, I just saw a lady collecting some of these leaves. They're just growing on the side of the road. She was collecting them, putting them into a little bag. So I stopped and asked her, what are you doing here? So she told me this is a leaf called, uh, wait, I don't remember the name, but it's a leaf that they used to cook. And people don't really know this, right? We go to the market, we buy our spinach, we buy carrots, we buy cabbages, these vegetables that are
Hmm.
not really indigenous as such, but
Hmm.
that's the only thing we know as edible. There's so much more edible food around us that we don't really know about, and if we don't take an effort to learn about them, this knowledge will be lost in a
Yes.
generation. It's not really documented much.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, and the agrobiodiversity has we've lost more agrobiodiversity. Obviously, we're living in an age of extinction, but a lot of people are unaware that the agrobiodiversity, we've lost more of that in the last 100 years, even than the rest. So, there's a good I had a conversation with Maria Ermolova Tarada. She's Russian living in Japan, and she nature journals in Japanese, English, Russian, and I think some French as well. And we ended up naming the conversation nature journaling biocultural diversity because she talked about how cultural diversity and biological diversity are connected. And so, if we're interested in preserving biodiversity, we need to try to preserve the cultural diversity as well. And I totally hear what you're saying about like, if we're out nature journaling, we should be trying to nature journal about the cultural aspect as well, the and biocultural. Um, but what do you think specifically about nature journaling being taken up by indigenous people? Do you think that that is a realistic thing, or what perspectives do you have on that?
Of course it is. The only problem is a lot of people, especially even my family members, for example, would consider it kind of weird to go around with a notebook and try to draw everything you see. So the
Hmm.
act of drawing is seen as, it's something you do only if you're good at it. People
Mm-hmm.
don't really see drawing as a way of communicating. And I think that should change. Once that changes, I think there's going to be a lot of difference in the way people view the world. Um,
Hmm.
Irrespective of who it is, if it's indigenous communities that live in the forests or if it's a school going child going to a fancy urban school, the moment they start nature journaling, you become friends with the thing that you're drawing, right? You become
Hmm.
friends with trees, you become friends with the birds. It's a personal relation that I feel is very important. So I don't know how we can encourage a diverse group of people to participate in nature journaling. But I think if we do it, it's going to create such a huge amount of knowledge that it's going to be really wonderful.
Yeah, okay. So I'm really interested in this topic, so I probably should bring it back to some other stuff, but it's definitely something that I'm very interested in because I also think that, as we know from history, the people who are doing the writing and this and everything, the writing down of stuff, it influences what later people see or what knowledge and stories are actually being told. So it's like we need to get, in my opinion, we need more people from mega biodiverse countries and culturally because India is also extremely diverse in how many languages are spoken. It's a very heterogeneous country, and so having a more different types of people nature journaling, I think, can only add to the richness. So I'm looking over here, and a lot of people have been commenting and saying how great it is to see you. So I'll just share a couple of these. Um, and Shirley as well. And there was also Shiny George, um, and who is very happy to see you
She's my
on here
mother.
again. Aw. That's so nice. It's so, sometimes my mom joins the lives. That's always a
In
okay.
fact, I would say
So
that a lot of my nature journaling has actually been started off by my mom. My mom is a botanist. And when we used to go for family vacations in Kerala, she used to give me a little notebook and a pencil and ask me to go and draw what I see. So it started there.
good job, Mom. You did a very good job. Okay, so let's talk about beginners a little bit. What is your number one tip for nature journaling beginners?
I think nature journaling is a lot to do with communicating what you see, not about creating great illustrations or great spreads. It's just a way of communicating. I think we keep forgetting that about drawing, that, drawing is just another language to communicate what you feel, what you see. I think once you remember that, it's a little less pressure to make it look good.
Yeah, okay, that's a great one. Okay, do you have any funny stories about when you were a beginner?
Beginner in nature journaling or beginner in.
In nature journaling or art, anything sort of illustration or nature journaling related?
I actually do. In fact, this is something I'm writing for the blog I'm planning to release soon, hopefully before the conference. I was actually at the Sanjay Gandhi National Park, which is it's a national park situated in the heart of Mumbai. So right in the center of the city, we have a really diverse national park, more than 45 leopards, and really cool space. I was
Wow.
there journaling one morning. I was waiting for a friend. I was alone, and I was looking up at sitting next to the riverside, observing things, drawing it down. And there was this old man who walked by, and he curiously looked at what I was doing, and then he went on to a 45-minute monologue about his personal relationship with God. I, I initially blocked out a lot of this,
Uh-huh.
but while I tried, he saw that I had a notebook and a pencil in hand, and he's like, write down what I'm saying.
Oh, wow.
So a little bit about that nature journal turned out to be the kind of things he told me. But there were a few interesting things that he did put up over there. One of the main things was to study nature is to understand God. So he gave me a whole monologue about how, when you study God's creations, you actually begin to understand the design behind it. You begin to understand how much thought has been put into, creating the world as it is this way. And there were a lot more interesting things he mentioned. Almost like an hour of my time, he took up with these little insights. But at the end of it, what happened is he was a really old man, let's say around 85, 86 years old. And it was evident that he hadn't spoken to anyone for a long time. So he was very happy that I patiently listened to him. And he gave me a little blessing before he was going to leave. And just as he was going to leave, he told me, see, God himself has come to you. And when I looked, he was pointing towards my shoulder. And when I looked at it, there was a little spider that had just come and, sat on my shoulder here. In a normal circumstance, I would have immediately like brushed it away. But at that moment, since he mentioned that this is God, I
Uh-huh.
was like, oh no, what do I do now? I think this
Wow.
is one of the most memorable experiences I've had while nature journaling. I think people just feel comfortable with coming and, seeing what you're doing and having a conversation with you.
Yeah, I think they maybe sense that you're listening, you're paying attention, and that's what they're looking for also. That's a really great story. I could see you making a comic about that. Like as you were mentioning the spider, I could see it like in your style of drawing. Okay, so we kind of moved on a little bit from the anthropology thing, but Rashmi has a really interesting question that I'm going to show on the bottom of the screen, and maybe you can. I think you addressed it a little bit, but this is an interesting question.
Oh, that's a good question. Mm, I think anthropology and sketching, I would feel are very linked together because both of them rely a lot on observation. It gives you a lens through which to see the world. Things that people normally tend to ignore, we look at those micro cues to kind of build together a picture of what that culture actually is. Uh, I think what my training in anthropology has helped me in this line is to actually pick up these little cues. It may be a little difficult for everyone to, there are a lot of things that we consider as very obvious, but when you actually poke through and try to find out what are the meanings behind the behavior, that people have, it gives you a more holistic picture about their relationship with nature, the way they understand it. Uh, if I have to give you a little example about this, in BNHS CEC, there is this one forest guard. He's actually someone who used to just, be a guard at that place. But he's someone who has a lot of traditional knowledge about that space. So he started taking trails, and the kind of trails he took was so different from the trails that were taken by experts, because experts had their
Mm-hmm.
knowledge which came in from books and practicals and this and that. He had knowledge that he got from his ancestors, from his family,
Mm-hmm.
and he would tell us this plant is edible. If you crush it up like this, you'll get a smell like this. These are things that I found really interesting and worth documenting. Most people
Mm-hmm.
will dismiss this as just being, people who don't. I mean, people who haven't really learned it professionally. They're just saying what they think of saying. But as anthropologists, I think it gives us a little bit of focus to pay attention to that and to give it importance. In
Mm-hmm.
terms of nature journaling, I think I would love to do a project where I try to document local knowledge in this way, trying to document local knowledge about plants and animals, because I think that will be a really great asset. In fact, I think that's an idea I should take up for a book.
Yes, I'll buy it. I think if I can, I studied anthropology as well in college, so that was my focus then. And I think one important thing also to point out is that there's a long history in anthropology of pointing the tool, like anthropology is a way of looking at things, right? And there's a long history of pointing it at other people's culture and not pointing it at yourself. And that has changed a lot in the last decades. So there's a lot of anthropological work that is done um, on within the same culture of the person who's doing it. So I think it's very important that we apply anthropological observations to our own culture and our own self, instead of just always using it as like, oh, the people who are living out there are an interesting focus. And I think, nature and culture are never very separated, and we're always looking through. I mean, you could say that botany and biology are always ethnobotany and ethnobiology, because there's always the human lens that it's being seen through. And so the Western, more scientific version is still a bias and it's still a lens. And so just that objectivity and realization that we still haven't figured out how to observe anything objectively. So when we're nature journaling, we should recognize that. And so some things that I do, for example, is I'll put questions about my own biases, like, what am I not noticing here? What would someone from another culture notice here? Or, what would this look like to an insect? Or things like that, to just kind of remind myself that I'm looking through a bias.
I think this is a really important point that you mentioned, because I was actually working on a nature journal picture book based in Mumbai. This was a project I had done with Creature Conserve Mentorship. And it took me a lot of time, because initially I was trying to make a very generic book, something that talks about nature journaling in general.
Mm,
But while I was discussing this with my mentor and with the team, I realized that in order to make it authentic, it has to be my own story. It has to be
mm.
reflexive. To give you one example of how this has panned out, this is something I really love to do.
I'm gonna put you on the solo layout here
Yeah.
for.
So what this is a personal map. This is a garden that I usually visit, and I've made a map of this. It's not a map that's going to be the same for everyone. This has little recordings, like, where I have seen these birds. What is my sit spot? Where
Mhm,
have I seen a paradise flycatcher for the first time? Where does the white-throated kingfisher always sit? This is my personal map, the way I see
mhm,
the space. And I think if we have multiple records, multiple accounts of people who use the same space, we'll get a whole lot of information that's very valuable. So
mm,
putting
mhm.
my ideas out there will kind of get people to think about how they themselves use this space. So I think it's very important to have that personal angle in your journal or in your sketchbook, because, if, as I said, if you don't tell your own stories, who will?
Yeah. Okay, I feel like there's a lot of things that I still wanted to ask, and talk about, but we're running out of time. So I can't like end the show without asking you about your TED Talk. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
So when I was invited for this talk, the person who called me said that they were very interested in the kind of nature journaling that I do, right? How drawing is actually a way to see nature, and that's the
Mhm.
kind of focus that I wanted. If I have to tell you a very clear example of this, there's this particular tree called the Pongam oil tree. Okay, it's something I never really paid attention to before, but I had to draw it for a certain project. Let's see if I have it around here. Yeah, it's a tree I had to draw for a particular project, and that was the first time I really paid attention to it. So I looked at a lot of pictures on iNaturalist to kind of draw that tree because I didn't know that it would be there somewhere around me. But after I drew that tree, I realized that I went for a walk in the garden near my house, and I realized that that is the tree that I've been seeing every day when I go for my walk. And I only really noticed it because I had drawn it. I paid attention to all of these on a screen in front of me, and because of that, I could actually see it out in nature. Even with my calendar and the kind of artwork I do, that is my focus. When people see that there's a little artwork here that people somebody has spent time and effort in making, that kind of sticks in your mind. And when you see that creature, suddenly you're
Yep.
you remember that artwork and that connection that it makes. Even something like this kingfisher drawing that I made, right? It's a kind of comic about how a kingfisher
Oh my
caught
gosh,
a
I
really
love
huge
how it's
fish.
swallowing the fish. Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
This is something I did during an urban sketching event, actually. I observed this kingfisher and I drew this. So when people see the drawing like this, it kind of stays in your memory. And the next time you see that bird that has, a white throat and a blue wings, you'll kind of remember that, oh, I had seen a drawing about this before. It's the white-throated kingfisher. That's kind of my attempt to here with nature journaling, to get people to actually observe and recognize what they see around them. I think that was the main essence of my TED Talk, how drawing is a way to see as well as a way to communicate.
I love that. I'm often trying to remind people that drawing is a learning tool and it's not just to make decorations, which is fine, but it's also such a powerful learning tool. So everybody go watch the TED Talk, and there's a link to it on the top of your Instagram, right?
Right, my bio.
Okay, let me put up your Instagram here in case people, and then I'll also put it into the comments. Yay. Wow. This conversation has gone a lot of places, and there was a lot of excited people in the audience. So that's always fun. Can we close with this question, which is, what is your dream project? What would be your dream project if you could do, and if money and time weren't a limiting factor?
I think the most common answer you would get for this is to travel the world and see all the animals. So I'm not going to say that. I'm going to think of something
Okay,
else.
good beginning.
Um, I think I would like to do some sort of project where we get kids to connect with nature. We get a lot of kids to connect with nature because these kids will grow up and become adults who will care about something that they have a personal relationship with. So it would be something that is integrated with the schooling system so that it's really large scale and something that children can personally connect with. So if it's nature journaling or taking nature trails, something of that sort is what I would really love to plan and do. Because I think that once you get the kids on your side, it's very easy to convince adults too. Adults don't want to disappoint
Yay.
kids. We should tap into that instinct.
Great, good one. That sounds like a wonderful project. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and I'm really looking forward to your color class. And thanks to everybody who joined the live, and this will be available on YouTube and Facebook afterwards as a recorded version. All right, everybody, thank you. Thank you, Sefi.
Thank you, Mali. It was
Bye.
really interesting
Where's my
talking
hand?
to
Oh,
you.
here.
Bye
Bye.
bye.